Welcome to the first ever episode of the Revolution Today podcast. Today we are talking about universal basic income, the basic knowledge associated with the topic, and much more. If you want to follow me throughout the weeks to come, I will be educating myself each week in the topic of universal basic income, and every week we will go deeper and deeper into the topic, and we will dive in and try to uncover and explain what universal basic income really is and how it affects the world and how we can implement it. So without further ado, here we go. Let's get into the episode. All right. So by now, you've probably seen and heard a lot about universal basic income. It's been over the news, all over the internet. Lots of people have been talking about it. You may probably remember universal basic income being discussed in the 2020 presidential election. Andrew Yang brought it up in his run, and he popularized this idea of universal basic income has been around for a long time. This has even been around since the founding of our country. But Andrew Yang, he of course popularized the idea of universal basic income, and this whole idea of paying people a certain amount of money a month is really something that I wouldn't say he definitely didn't create the idea. He definitely didn't champion the idea, but he definitely brought the idea forward into the spotlight. Something that we talk about mainly every day now. We talk about it in the news, on the internet, like I said, and we really discuss this idea as a solution of many problems we face now. COVID coming out and having the lockdowns. This was an idea that was addressed as a possible solution by many people and brought forth in the mainstream media and on the internet, and it was used as a idea for solving the problems due to the lockdown. But Andrew Yang, when he ran for president, he brought it up as a position in his policy page, and he really put a lot of effort into making sure that UBI was the center of his campaign, because he saw a lot of things in the future that would go wrong if UBI was not implemented, specifically automation and AI taking over the workforce and running people out of business. UBI itself is definitely worth looking into because of automation. You have automation of different jobs and different businesses, all kinds of things. Just like you're gonna have, like, at some point down the road, basic jobs that people do, like even now you go to like a McDonald's, or you go to like a fast food place, even Walmart, and automation is already driving out the cashiers. At some point, there's going to be a time when cooks and wait staff, they're going to be automated away and replaced with cheaper alternatives. They're already starting to do automation of cooks and that sort of thing in some places across the country here. I've even seen in Vegas, they automated away a coffee barista. So there's no longer a need for a human behind the counter making coffee for people. You go up to it, you put your money in, and the robot makes the coffee for you and gives it to you. And they don't have to pay a human being to do that. They can do it cheaply with a robot, and they can make a ton more money that way. That's the appeal of automation and AI taking over jobs, is that it's more profitable. It's more profitable in the end goal. Automation, you don't have to pay the robots a wage for them to survive. You can buy a robot, it does everything for you, and at the end of the day, you keep all the profit. Simple enough. Very, very simple. You just take the profit, don't have to pay them anything. And Andrew Yang was like, well, hey, this is a big issue. We're facing a crisis on our hands where in the future, automation is going to take away the most important jobs, and people are going to be left in the dust without any sort of income. And universal basic income is the solution. He popularized this idea of universal basic income through what he called the freedom dividend. Most of you know that. If you didn't know that, that's what he did. He called it the freedom dividend, which in turn would have taken a VAT tax system, I think of 10%, and that would have gone towards the tech companies and the companies that don't pay taxes. So that would tax the goods that they produce, that they sell, through the whole process. And that money would go towards the basic income, the freedom dividend. Now, it never happened. He never got into the White House. Well, let's not forget his determination, his passion for universal basic income, and his advocacy for universal basic income really took it to the next level, because without him talking about it, we would not have mayors for a guaranteed income. We would not have a basic income trials across the country. We would not have California opting to do a statewide basic income. And we wouldn't be having basic income marches or basic income rallies in the country. And it's definitely more prevalent these days with the talk of UBI. I mean, you go back even, let's see, 5-6 years ago, there wouldn't have been any talk of UBI in the mainstream media or the internet. I mean, yeah, of course, you'd go to certain spots on the internet, you'd find information about it, but it wouldn't be talked by a lot of people. But you go to CNN, you go to Fox News, and you go to MSNBC, NBC News, all that stuff. You go to their main page and you'll find articles on UBI. You go to Forbes, New York Times, I think even any news site, and they'll have at least one article on universal basic income. So it's definitely become more popularized and more prevalent in modern times. Even before Andrew Yang, you go back years back, like beginning of the decade, guy named Scott Santens, who is really popular among the UBI community, because he's the one who kind of started this whole movement. I mean, let's be honest, without Scott, Andrew Yang would not have talked about UBI in a way that he did. I don't think he would have ever been made aware of it or even given it any attention. Scott really did do a good job at convincing a lot of people, especially Andrew Yang, that UBI is the way forward. I think Andrew Yang knew that automation and AI was going to be a big issue, but he just didn't know what the solution would be. And it wasn't until Scott and Andrew Yang met up and became friends that they decided UBI is the way forward. So Scott really did he did a lot of work with the UBI writing. He writes a lot of articles now. I see articles, tweets, YouTube videos. He's really going hard on this whole UBI thing. He's even got a Patreon that has a bunch of people giving him money. So he's basically getting a basic income through a crowdfunded means. It's amazing what he's done. And he's really fighting for universal basic income, because a lot of us believe that universal basic income is the future and is necessary to, well, not only help stop the effects of automation and AI, but to also end poverty. Poverty is one thing that we can all agree on in the universal basic income community. that needs to be addressed and that can be solved and eliminated through the means of a basic income. And it's definitely something that we can together do if we actually put the effort in. It's something that, you think, oh, poverty, it's never going to get completely abolished. It's always going to be there. It's not going to be completely eliminated, but it can be. If you put basic income in the picture, it can be eliminated completely, and everybody could then have a foundation to stand on, to which they can build up and focus on better and bigger things. And really, it also is very important because it would make society a lot more creative and a lot more focused on improving humanity as a whole, when they're not focused on trying to survive. And I think it would not only benefit humanity, but it would benefit the economy, but it would also benefit humanity, because you would have more people focused on bigger things, and they wouldn't have to worry about when their next paycheck's coming, or if they're going to even survive the next week. So it's definitely important for humanity that we try to get this passed and try to get this to be a fundamental piece of society, because it is definitely going to make more people focus on bigger things. It's going to make us more creative, more innovative, and all that. It's gonna really help out. But when Andrew Yang, I read Andrew Yang's book, The War on Normal People, and in it he talks about automation, AI, and taking over jobs and that sort of thing. But he also talks about universal basic income a little bit, and how it's going to be necessary to take really the profits of robot AI and automation from the companies, take the profits from those and give it to the people, because then the people have a slice of the pie that companies are getting from automation and AI. It takes some of that money and it gives it back to the people, so that they can empower themselves and choose to live the way that they want. And that's why Andrew called it a freedom dividend, because the freedom dividend, it's freedom. It gives you freedom to choose how you want to live your life, and it gives you the freedom to do what you want in life. And it's something that I think would benefit everybody, and everybody should at least give it a chance and look into it if you haven't. But really, without Andrew, without Scott, without some of these people, I don't think we would ever be on the path towards universal basic income. We wouldn't even be on the right timeline. See, we're in the timeline where universal basic income gets passed and everybody is able to live happy. That's the timeline we're in, the timeline we're on. But without them, we wouldn't be here on this timeline. We would be in a world without universal basic income, and without them, we wouldn't even be talking about it. Yes, there's other people that have fought for it and talked about it, but I don't think anybody in the modern world has ever advocated for such an idea and actually made progress in getting it mainstream. You had other people doing it and talking about it, but no one has made as much ground as Scott and Andrew did in the last 10 years. So it's definitely been good to have them on their side, because now look at us. We're talking about it in the media. There's programs and pilots all across the country. California is doing a statewide $1,000 a month to 40 million people basic income. It's getting ground. It's gaining ground. And I think that if anybody in Congress was smart enough, they would take this idea and push it through, because this isn't just going to help the economy. It's also going to help the people. and the people will get to breathe easier, choose their own path, and live a life that they can be happy with. This episode of the Revolution Today podcast is sponsored by my Patreon. No, I am not sponsored by corporations or brands. I am simply sponsored by the generous people on my Patreon who support me. So if you'd like to support my efforts in getting UBI passed and becoming a reality in this country, please click the link down below and check out my Patreon. That is patreon.com/revolutiontoday. When you look at universal basic income, nowadays you would probably think Andrew Yang, Scott Santens, those types. But really it goes far back. You look back even further beyond the founding of our country. Like you go to the very beginnings of our country's foundation. Thomas Paine, he was in favor of universal basic income. You go even further beyond, you have the likes of Martin Luther King Jr., who fought for universal basic income years before his death. He called it the guaranteed minimum income. You have people like Milton Friedman, I think. Yeah, Milton Friedman, even not Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon. They were all in favor of some type of basic income. Like even you go look at the Nixon administration. There was at one point in the House of Representatives, twice actually, a Republican-led House of Representatives was in favor of a minimum income in the form of, I forget what they called it. I think it was like the family income or something like that. I forget what it was called, but it was basically a minimum income where families would get a certain amount of money a month in the entire year. It even passed the House twice. Never made it past the Senate because the Democrats at the time were fighting for more money on it, and then ended up dying in the Senate because there just wasn't enough support at the time from the Democrats. You look at even in Alaska in the 80s, they started an oil dividend. So the money that the state makes off of oil and that sort of thing, it gets handed out to every single Alaskan in the form of $2,000 a year. So it really does have historical applications to it in the historical time of the United States. You know, it was an idea long before this country even like existed. You know, Thomas Paine, then it became Martin Luther King, then Richard Nixon, then who else? Then of course, then you move on, and then you have Milton Friedman. I think his name is Milton Friedman. Friedman. Then you have nowadays Scott Santens and Andrew Yang are on the path. I mean, there's others, but I don't think anybody pushed harder for universal basic income than Andrew Yang, Scott Santens, MLK. I mean, really, it's been a part of our nation's history and past since like the beginning of its founding. You know, UBI has been in the spotlight recently, but it's always had a place in this country. It just never got the attention it needed. And here's the thing, if it was almost passed under a Republican House of Representatives, there's no reason why the Republicans today would be opposed to a universal basic income. That's the one problem in this modern era, is that Republicans are against universal basic income because they think it's welfare or it's a handout. But in reality, it was supported by Republicans in the 70s. It's supported by a Republican state, Alaska. It's definitely got support among Republicans throughout history. The thing is, Republicans today need to realize universal basic income, it cuts poverty, it grows the economy, and it allows people to better their lives. Now, if you're a Republican and you're against those three things, then you can't call yourself. I wouldn't call myself an American citizen, because if you're not a real American citizen, would be in favor of making this country better for all people. And if you're a Republican who's against that and says that it's a handout, it's socialism, and you're against fixing those problems and making things better, then just don't call yourself an American citizen. I know this is getting off topic, but that's the truth. You can't sit there and call yourself a citizen of this country if you don't want it to get better. Because universal basic income is going to make things better, because it's going to allow people to participate in the economy. It's going to allow them to dig out of the hole that they have that they were placed in. It's going to allow them to have a better life. It's going to give them financial security. It's going to make them less stressed, less depressed, much happier, because now they know that, hey, the government cares about me and is supporting me through a monthly check. So in the end, it's a positive for everybody, and it can't be paid for. We're already paying trillions of dollars on wasteful wars in the world. If we can spend trillions, like, I'm not saying we need to spend it, we need to pay for it through the government's money. I'm just saying that the government itself is paying trillions in wasteful wars and international matters that it could spend on programs and policies here in the country. But besides that, we can actually pay for this program, this basic income, universal basic income, without the government money. We can pay for it through, I said earlier, a 10% VAT tax. Yes, the VAT tax is regressive on its own, and that's the one criticism we have from people, is that the VAT tax is progressive on its own. But if you pair it with a UBI, you only lose about 10% of your basic income to VAT tax. In turn, you still have that 90% of your basic income that is still intact and is still spendable. So in the end, you have your basic income, only 10% is taken away due to the VAT. That leaves the 90% of it left for you to spend and use however you like. That to me is progressive. It takes care of the regressive nature of the VAT tax. It just adds on extra money, UBI. It adds on UBI, takes only 10% off of that, and then the rest of it, you're in good shape. People say, well, they'll just raise the prices. I mean, yeah, that's a typical response. That I understand that response. I get that. They could raise the prices, but why would they? If they raise the prices, people are not going to spend money. The reason why no one's really spending money now on products and that sort of stuff is because they don't have the money. So if you give people more money with universal basic income, they're going to want to lower the prices of their products so more people buy them. Because now that people have cash in their hands and are able to spend it, they're going to want to take every chance they get to lower their prices of their products so more and more people can buy it. And then in turn gives them more money. It's kind of like if you think about it, like Southwest Airlines. You get free bags. You don't have to pay for your bags to go on the plane. And that's because Southwest Airlines makes their money in bulk from seats. So they make their money off of seats more than they make more than enough money through seating than they would with bags. Like, they can make a ton more money with bags, but they don't need to, because they already make a ton of money through bulk in terms of seating. So if you apply that analogy to shopping, they could make more money by lowering the prices and selling in bulk to more people than they would if they raised the prices and people couldn't afford to pay for it. So in the end, universal basic income definitely is a good option because it will give people more cash flow, and in turn people can spend more, because right now no one's going to pay let's say a TV is like $300. No one's going to pay $300 for a TV with money they don't have. They only have enough money to buy food and shelter. They don't have enough to spend on extra luxuries. But if they have a $2,000 a month universal basic income, they can afford to pay for those products because they have extra cash coming in that they know they're guaranteed to have. So in the end, it's good for businesses to support universal basic income because it means they'll get more money on their products if they keep the prices the same. And in turn, more people will grow the economy. More people with cash in their hands will grow the economy. So it's also good for the government to support this idea, because then the government's going to have a growing economy that is going to be unstoppable and things will look great. I mean, it doesn't make sense why someone like Joe Biden wouldn't support a universal basic income. Because if a president of the United States is sitting there with a universal basic income and the economy starts growing because of the universal basic income, I don't know why they wouldn't support it. Because if you're a president and the economy is growing, that's good for you. That looks good on your record and it looks good on paper for you. So it doesn't make sense why you wouldn't support a universal basic income that would grow the economy. It would make you look good. And if it were me, I would do it. I obviously wouldn't do it for the recognition or the prestige of it, but I would just do it for the benefit of everybody else. But in any case, if you do it, if you even do it for that reason, it doesn't matter because it's still going to help. Yes, it might be a little bit bad that you're doing it for your own image purpose, for the purpose of bettering your own image, but in the end, it still helps. So either way, I don't know why Joe Biden doesn't support a universal basic income, because it would make him look good and make the economy look good, and in turn, people would be more favorable towards a second Biden term. But I can't speak for him. I can't change his mind. I'm not in the same room as him. I'm not in the same family as him. I don't have that influence over him. So it's up to him to decide if he wants to support universal basic income or not. I can't decide for him. But it would be very much appreciated if he at least considered universal basic income and decided that it's a good thing for him and his administration to do. At the very least, it could make him look better. It could give him an image boost and make him much more appealing for a second run, for a second term. But right now, nobody wants to vote for Biden. No one really likes Biden because he doesn't support policies that the people would need. So I don't want to get off topic, but basically what I'm trying to say is if Joe Biden supported UBI, it would make him look good, it would make the economy look good, and it would be good for the people. So it's a win-win for everybody. That's what UBI is, a win-win for every single person. You have the people of America doing good because of UBI. You have the president doing good because it makes him look better. And you have the economy doing good because UBI gives money into people's hands and allows them to participate. So in the end, it's a win-win. It's a win-win for all sides. And I just don't see why they don't support it or why the government doesn't see it as an option. They should, because it's definitely worth looking into, because it's a net positive for every single side of the square. All sides of the square, it's a net positive. So I don't see why they wouldn't support it, but that's up to them to support and up to them to decide. I just don't know why they wouldn't, because UBI is going to be very helpful in the long run. If you're not following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, my username is Revolution Today. Some accounts are Revolution Today with the O and Today being a 0. Some aren't. But you should be able to find me if you search up Revolution Today on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I'll leave the links in the description if you want to go follow me through that. And also, if you're not supporting me on Patreon, please consider. It'll help me keep running the podcast, keep running my Facebook page, my TikTok, and my Instagram, and my Twitter. So thanks again for watching. Thanks again for supporting. I really appreciate it. So just really sum this up. I mean, we're not going to finish off here quite yet. I want to go until a certain point. But to really finish it up here and really talk about UBI in the modern world, in the recent years, I think since the 90s, there's been a movement for basic income. Specifically, I think one of the organizations, I forget which one, they started in the 90s and are still going today. But ever since the 90s, like going forward, there's been different trials across the world. I know in Africa, one of the countries in Africa, I think it was Kenya. I think Kenya, maybe. They did a basic income trial. They gave $20 to people every month or every week or something like that. And it actually showed in the evidence that they spent it on necessities and stuff that they needed rather than luxuries and vices. Because the big concern really with universal basic income nowadays is that it'll be spent on drugs, alcohol, just overall bad things. But in this testing, in this program, this pilot in Kenya this trial, turns out they're spending it on, a lot of them were spending it on food, milk, necessities like clothing. Some were sending their kids to school with this money and doing that sort of thing. And it actually was beneficial. And it actually showed that there's potential for UBI to benefit society. And they've done one in the Nordic countries. I think one was in Finland. They did it, where they did a test. They did a basic income trial for some number of people, and they tested to see what would happen if they got a certain amount of cash per month. I forget the number that they decided on, but it was a very relatively big number, like in the $500 range maybe. But they did that every month. They did that. They gave it. It was like a 3-4 year trial. They did $500 a month to a certain number of people, and they found out that those who got the money for $500 a month gained more employment than those who didn't get one, and those, in fact, also who got the basic income a month were much happier than those who had not received the $500 a month. I'm not saying $500 a month is the perfect number, because in my opinion, $2,000 a month is the perfect number for basic income, because it is on par with minimum wage adjusted to inflation. So $2,000 is definitely the number to go to. But in this testing, they found out people are much happier. And this is the thing, a lot of people these days, you see a lot of people who are suicidal, depressed, just really down on themselves. And this is part of the reason is they don't have any income. They don't have any income. They don't have any financial prospects. They don't have much to go for. So their whole idea is, you know what, I'm just better off not being alive because I don't have the money. I don't have income to survive. So I'd just be better off dead, which is never the option. It's never the right way to go. Don't ever do that. But with this UBI, it shows that people become more happier, less depressed. They feel like they can finally live and breathe without having a boot over their neck. And so really this actually shows, and this is why I theorize that basic income will make people less depressed and less suicidal. It'll cut that drastically because people won't have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from, where their next paycheck is going to come from, because they know every month they're getting $2,000 a month. So it is definitely something that's beneficial towards your average human. But they've tried many trials across the country, across the world. They've done what started in Stockton with I think his name's Tubbs, Mayor Tubbs. He did a $500 a month guaranteed income trial for his citizens, and it turns out they were able to get employment, find better jobs, actually get out in the world, be happy. Just overall, they were just happier people, and they actually were able to survive and thrive in this system. But it shows now that there is a guaranteed income, or mayors for a guaranteed income program being undertaken right now. It's definitely there's definitely an interest in that, because it now shows from those trials that basic income does work, and it actually helps people immensely. So now that there's tons of mayors, over at least 50 or so mayors or more, have supported this guaranteed income program, that now they're testing out guaranteed income in their cities and showing what the power of UBI does. Well, it's not UBI, it's the power of basic income does for people who need it. And it's going to really help shape the conversation on basic income and universal basic income within this country and within the government, because it's going to prove that sending money to everybody a month does have positive effects and does benefit everybody. And it does help. It does help. It will help once everybody gets a piece of that universal basic income. It'll help them a lot. It'll definitely help me. But for the most part, it also would help. It would really help a lot of people, especially the creative people. I know people who make content, who are artists, who are musicians, who want to do what they want to do, but they don't have the money to do it. And universal basic income, being what it is, would allow more people to be creative, more people to do the stuff that they want to do. It would also make society more innovative. More research could be done on certain things. People would be able to pursue what they want and do what they want without fear of starving in the streets, really. So UBI in this modern world is something that would be very beneficial and very highly important to the people of this world. I think that it's the first step in really changing society for the better. UBI in itself would benefit everybody. It would be a really positive part of society. In the end, UBI would fix a lot of the main societal issues we face, like poverty, depression and suicide, hunger, and that sort of thing. Those are just the main things that it would cover, and it would help curb those effects in society and would help eliminate those problems. And again, we can't forget to thank Andrew Yang, Scott Santins, Martin Luther King, and those who came before us who really fought for this idea, because without them, we wouldn't be sitting here thinking about this or talking about this or even fighting for it. I wouldn't have even known about it if it wasn't for Andrew Yang. A lot of you wouldn't have known about it without Andrew Yang or Scott Santins or whoever. We wouldn't be in this conversation. We wouldn't be having this conversation in the world right now, or especially in the country. So big thanks to them for pushing UBI in the modern 21st century and really pushing for basic income across the country. Anyways, that's going to do it for this episode of the Revolution Today podcast. Tune in next week as I dive deeper into universal basic income and as I share my thoughts and my knowledge on the subject. As always, if you haven't, make sure to go in the description, check out my other social medias, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you're not already supporting me on Patreon, please make sure to check that out. There are many great benefits, and it would be greatly appreciated if you could support me in helping further this movement. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Revolution Today podcast. Join me next week as we dive deeper into the topic of universal basic income. That'll do it for this episode. Again, check out the description. All my links are down there, and I'll see you next week.